Hello everyone, I'm Silverraptor and welcome back to another Wargame Red Dragon deck building video where I'm again joined with Razzman. Hello Razzman.
Yo, what's up?
So again, going with your viewer selected decks. This time it's just a plain old fashioned Czech deck, right?
Yeah, there's a little bit of history with Czech decks and me that you are most likely not aware of.
Probably not.
So it's like especially the player Greyhound, who is also Czech. Every now and then he queued up against me in a ranked match, and every now and then he brought his Czech national deck, which by no means is a top tier deck or anything. There's no reason to play Czech when you can play Entente, or back then before Entente, Eastern Bloc, of course.
Right.
But for whatever reason, when he was playing any other deck, I would, back then, nowadays it's not the case anymore, but back then I would usually win. But whenever he brought out his Czech deck, I always had massive issues for no real reason. I don't understand why. And there's some compilations of me getting salty when I play versus his Czech deck. So it's kind of like a little bit of a meme. In my channel, so I think that's also a reason why several people suggested it.
All right, that is actually pretty funny. But anyways,
yeah.
In the Eastern Bloc deck, when I was making Eastern Bloc, first playing this game first came out and such, I kind of noticed just by the number of units that I was getting from different nationalities of the Eastern Bloc that I was getting more of the Czech like equipment and such. Not necessarily the infantry, but a lot of the other.
Oh yeah, tanks, support tab, planes, helicopters. Czech have some very good stuff to offer. And though to be fair, it has to be said, there are a couple of units that are more or less stat copies, or sometimes outright stat copies of each other. For example, the whole OSA line, all three nations get access to the OSA AK and OSA AKM, for example. But I feel like that all of the nations are pretty solid, but Eastern Bloc or the Coalition gives them all just that little bit extra that they need, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. All right, so let's dive into the logistics tab. Again, I made this deck ahead of time, so it's not that I'm copying you or anything. So first off,
or
again,
I copying you.
that would never happen. So first we started off with a fob.
I always have the fob last. I always start off with the CVs. And then I put in my supply.
I just picked the fob because I thought I'm going to get it out of the way, toss it aside. So for the CVs, I have the infantry and MI-17s, and
same.
The MI-17 for HE basically say what enemy infantry.
One of the best rocket pod transports, and it's very, very good to have.
Yep. For my secondary CV, I decided to get the T-72 tank, and the reason why this is how I see CV tanks is that the CV status is you add 100 points. So if you subtract 100 points from it and you see, hey, would I get this tank for 60 points? If answer yes, then most likely we'll get it as a CV tank. Of course, I am weird and I sometimes like to have my CV tanks engage into fighting because I'm weird like that. Which is probably not the smartest idea, but I do it sometimes.
Yeah, I get your point, but yeah, usually it's sadly not as easy as that, because obviously even if you feel it as a 60-point tank, it still is a 160-point unit that you don't want to lose under any circumstances.
Right.
But I also have that CV. Usually I don't run infantry and tank CV as my only two CVs. In this case, I have made a exception more or less for one because I get 4 infantry card instead of 3 because of the nationality bonus.
Yep.
And 2, it's a team deck, so I don't have to have as many CVs, and I can have CVs to be on the more expensive side as well.
Right. And then of course I also got 2 cards of Kolos.
I got 1 because I have a fob. Why do I need 2 cards?
Yeah, I just get.
And you get 8 per card. So
7.
If you got.
I got the 40 point.
Oh, you have the 40.1. Okay, I personally like this 30.1. But even if when it comes to the 40.1, when are you gonna need a second card? Think about it. You're never gonna. The chances that all of your supply trucks die is incredibly low.
Yeah.
And you basically usually or I'm pretty sure that as soon as you see, oh, I have an empty supply truck, you're gonna send it back to your fob, right?
Yeah, I guess that's a good habit to get into.
And it's not like you have like 5 or 6 or all of your supply trucks empty at the front line.
Yeah,
right?
definitely not.
So you're always gonna, especially with like these more expensive ones, and considering the availability bonus of getting 7, I never see how a second card of supply trucks is gonna be useful. I mean, granted, with the Czech deck, it can sometimes be a bit tough to fill all the action points, activation points, because sometimes there's just not a whole lot of good stuff to choose from. But
yeah, I mean, I guess I could support. I guess just looking at my top slots, I guess I could remove a Kolos and get like an extra unit or
I
something.
mean,
and
either
support.
that or I mean, I guess you might as well potentially get the Mi4. It's trash, but maybe you'll end up in a game where you have a unit behind enemy lines around the whole map, and you for whatever reason have to resupply it or something.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to the helicopter sometime soon. Let's go to the infantry.
Yeah, no, I mean the Mi4 supply truck.
Yeah. So you got the T. You basically have almost mirror copy of logistics, right?
Yeah, more or less. I have one less card of supplies, and I have 30 points on.
All right. Infantry. I decided to get this Sadakai Kari. Sorry.
Oh, Visad Kari. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, Visad Kari.
Yeah, I think it's Visad Kari. Yeah.
Yeah, and Mi-17s as well. They're basically my emergency shock-trained troops get to the front line quickly with really killy helicopters. And then for my regular infantry, I got Motostrosi and OT-62Bs, and I got 2 cards of them, so I've got quite a bit of them. And for fire support, I decided to get some Granadomets. I know they only fire like 2 grenades at a time.
Oh no, that's just a visual thing. Granadomets are absolute beasts when it comes to killing infantry.
Oh, if I was just like 2 grenades, just like boom, boom, pause, boom, boom.
No, I'm pretty sure it's not like that. I don't know it off the top of my head, but that's just a visual thing. I wouldn't. All
right. Well, I also got them in some Vidra 2s because that's a pretty scary-looking autocannon. And finally, I got some Conqueror's M because we could get 8 Conqueror's M in this deck, so that's definitely beneficial. And I got them in OT-64Cs, so that they're fast-moving, and also because they have an extra ATGM, even though the ATGMs will probably never hit. It's nice to have another missile.
Never underestimate my Yutkas. Never underestimate my Yutkas.
I know they can occasionally hit, but I'm just like, I
mean, you effectively get it for free, right? If you compare it to the OT-64A, so
yeah,
you might as well.
Definitely, and also basically I'm getting 2 ATGMs and 1 card, if I think of it this way.
Sort of. It's like a ghetto Fuchs Milan.
Yep. So those are my infantry. What's your combination?
I have the La Capichota on the Mi-17. They're not as the second infantry from the top. They're not as useful in team games as they are in 1 versus 1, but they're still extraordinary in being able to defend towns against light IFVs and both infantry and light IFVs. For example, we said Kari or something would most of the time just not be able to shoot back at IFVs. They're just as good as we said Kari against infantry for the most part, but they can sometimes be tough to deal with, especially if the enemy can't really get far away with their IFVs and has to be somewhat close, then they can be tough to deal with. And in the Mi-17, just to have another infantry or another cheaper unit in an Mi-17, very useful, basically for the same reason as you do. Then we said Kari 90 in the OT-64C. I'm not really a fan of those, but those are basically the only infantry with any actual decent anti-tank weapon.
Yeah.
Outside of the Recon tab. And then card of base, we said Kari in the OT-64C as more or less main infantry, as well as Motostrelki in the Vidra 2. As you said, very, very nice IFV.
Yeah.
And then last but not least, obviously Conqueror's M in the OT-64C.
Yeah. All right, so it is a bit of
it is very, very similar, I'd say, except for the HG-17, which I just can't fit them in. I'd like to have them in, but I just can't fit them in. I feel like I need everything else that I already have.
All right, well, I'll see if I can put the Granadomets in good effect in my deck then.
Yeah.
All right, support tab, which I'm probably thinking I might need to add a little bit more to. We've got, for the first off is, of course, the Ondavas. Beast of an artillery piece. Very fast, very high fire rate. Good
It doesn't have a high fire rate. It has a very low fire rate when it comes compared to other 10-second aim time artillery.
Okay, well...
Unfortunately. Again, one of those things that you can't see when you look at the stat card.
I see. It's one of those mod inside things that you have knowledge
sort of, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's just unfortunate that these kind of stuff. It's like the game is already hard enough on new players, but if this type of stuff isn't properly shown, then yeah.
It's still a good artillery piece.
I mean, I wouldn't call it good, but
really?
I think no. I mean, it is a 10-second aim time artillery piece, but that's the main advantage. But I mean, if you want artillery in the deck,
I do.
It's probably the best, or heavy artillery. It's probably the best. I may honestly potentially go for the 100-point Pivonka instead. While it does have 30 seconds aim time, it hits heavy. And the problem with Ondava is that sure you have 10 seconds aim time, but the low rate of fire means that if the opponent sees the first shot, then he has usually enough time to move the unit out of the way before the second one hits. So basically, I mean, of course, in a way you can sort of deny a certain position, but then again, with the low rate of fire, that damage output is not very high either. So personally, I'd probably go for the Pivonka maybe even instead. But I, on my side, have no heavy artillery at all in my deck.
I see. Well, I'm keeping the Ondava. I'm sorry, I've had too much success with it.
I'm not saying it's wrong. It's still the only 10 seconds aim time artillery piece that you have, and it can certainly be worth it.
Yeah. Speaking of which, the second card unit, I've got the Prams, which I think are some of the best mortars in the game. Or is that?
Sorry, yeah. I mean, it depends on what you mean with best, because obviously it has 5 HE, but the 5 HE mortars, they have a longer aim time than the lower HE mortars. Mm-hmm. They have shorter bursts. Obviously, on the other hand, then therefore they deal more damage and they have more range. Now, it's when it comes to 5 HE mortars, it's certainly one of the best, and definitely the best red foam mortar. Yeah.
Yeah. What I like to call these kinds of units Martillery. For AA, I got the Strop 2 because, well, it's a pretty good AA unit for all infrared.
I honestly dislike the Strop 2. And
really?
I can't. Yeah. It's a very personal thing. I can't really say, hey, look at the stats. The unit is objectively trash. That's not it. I'm not saying it's an objectively bad unit or something, or you're doing something wrong with taking it. But I've seen many good players use the Strop 2, you know. But I just personally really dislike the Strop 2. It is very bad against planes. It has only 4 missiles, which can be very annoying. And even against helicopters, it's really not that effective from my experience. It disappointed me just one too many times. I used to really like it, but I'll never take it ever again, I think.
Are you sure it's not because you had a lot of your helicopters shot down?
No.
Well,
it's just if it had 8 missiles, then I'd say okay, but it happens way too often. It just runs out of 4 missiles, and then the damage output is too low to effectively really do something.
Well, that main gun is what I'm mainly getting it for. I've shot down many helicopters with that gun, and also stunned helicopters where the missile's in flight, and then the missile decides, no, I want to go over here instead, and then the helicopter dies.
Yeah, I'll pass.
All right, well, your loss. And finally, the OSA AKM, because I was thinking I needed some anti-aircraft AA, and I decided to try out the OSAs. I've never really had a chance to do so, and you keep giving them glowing reviews, so I'm going to try it out.
Yep, I have the Pram, OSA AKM, and then the PLRK S10M, which is basically a Strata 10M. Which I've never really used it. Although I really should use it more because they buffed it in the very last patch by 5 points, which is kind of nice. And I think for 45 points, they're really, really pretty good, honestly. At least
They're
looking
good.
at the stat cards. But I just never really get the chance to use them.
Right.
Because either I'm playing Eastern Bloc, and then I have LSTR and OSA as 90% of my AA, so I'll barely ever fall back to the Strelaten M. Or I'm playing Entente, and then I have access to the Sava.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm just going to let you know, I swapped out that extra Kolos in the logistics tab for an extra card of Osas, and I've upvetted them, so I've got 10 hardened
I've
Osas.
updated them anyways, because 5 is kind of plenty. 6 is like the sweet spot, but I think 5 should be plenty.
And 10 is overkill, which I like overkill.
Sort of, but I mean, if you have nothing else to put in, I'd say it's more useful than putting in a second card of supply trucks.
I would say so too. So you got the Strela 10M, you've got some Osas, I'm guessing. What else?
Also AKM, Strelaten M, and the Prem order.
Alright, so you only got 3 cards in your support?
Yep.
Oh, interesting. Alright, let's go to the tank tab. And of course I got the Moderna, because we get 4 of them.
Obviously. Why? Like, it's just one of the best tanks in the game. And one of the reasons is just for whatever reason you get 3 per card base, and then check you get 4. So that's obviously nice.
Yeah, I also, there's a bit of history with me in this tank. When I was first playing, I got into a fight with like a couple of heavy tanks, and the main gun was attacking well, I wouldn't say heavy tanks, they were more like medium tanks. But the main gun was targeted towards them, and at the same time, like a Lynx Toad 2 or something came over the hill and started targeting it, and the autocannon turned and shot towards the Lynx, stunned it, and it was able to take out 2 tanks and a helicopter all by itself when I was using it.
That autocannon can be darn useful. It does run out of ammo very quickly, though.
It does, but it's still really useful.
Otherwise, it would be too strong, which it arguably already is.
Yeah. Next up, I've decided to get 2 cards of hardened T-72Ss, which I think are a pretty good tank unit. With the high AP, 4 HE power, fairly accurate, 50% accuracy, but it's got decent armor, so I figure it's a good enough
It's
tank.
a pretty alright tank, yeah.
And then finally, for my medium cheaper, I've got what I like to call a sniper tank. The T55AM2 Dyna 1. It's got 50% accurate gun. It's got a nice ATGM, 2,800 meters, but it's also got 13 front armor, so it's not going to die to too many one-shot ATGM missiles or something. It'll be able to survive a hit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what are your tanks? I'm guessing I know one of them.
I have the Moderna, obviously.
Yeah.
One card of upwetted T-72Ss, one card of upwetted T-72 M1Ms, and a card of base T-72 upwetted. I'm only running one card of T-72Ss because I'm probably not going to end up using them a whole lot, because I'll either get the Moderna instead or the M1M instead. Which and if I end up running out of Modernas, there's a good chance that I basically already lost the game. Or if I run out of both the 4 Modernas and the 5 T-72Ss, there's a good chance that I've probably already lost. T-72 M1M is just in a very, very nice sweet spot. It is very, very deadly to other medium tanks in the same price range, because the sphere is gonna do a lot of damage. It's just when I end up having to fight in closer quarters, then it's a very good alternative to the T-72S, because it'll probably end up doing just as much damage while also being cheaper. Or if I just want to spam the sphere, I have a cheaper option. The Dyna one, I really tried to like, and I pushed really hard to get this piece of shit buff, but it's honestly, I think it is just terrible. Because you basically end up paying 65 points for a 13 armor Arcan carrier. Because the gun is absolute dog shit. You have poor optics, meaning you're jack shit when you're on your own, because you can't see the enemy. You have 2100 meter range, which means you lose to any other decent tank by default. You have a crap stabilizer, and 15 AP isn't all too much to write home about. And 8 RPM it did get up from 7 to 8, but yeah, for 65 points, the gun, the optics, the speed are just horrible. I pushed so hard trying to get it at least a 2275 meter range, but when you're out of arcane missiles, it's just basically a helpless little unit because in the current metagame you rarely end up fighting any cheap-ish tanks. Sure, we saw the Leopard 1A4 in that one game, but it's not very rare, and it's just too expensive for what it does because you buy it for the Arcane, right? That's what you obviously buy it for. But if you look at the T-72M1M, the T-72S, sure they're more expensive, but they're very, very capable even without their missiles. The Dyna 1 really isn't. It's basically gonna be a glorified IFV killer for that.
I see. Well, I'm going to keep it this time. I'm going to see how it works in the game, and then I might come back and revisit it because you do make some good points.
I'm obviously very, very vocal about it, but I tried so hard to get it into a decent spot, but ultimately, yeah. And the base T-72 just to have a cheap kind of tank in case I need something for like Martyr 2 killings or something along those lines.
Okay.
Yeah, and for HE, it's still decent enough as fire support should I need it or should I have it around already with the heavy MG at least. So it's just okay, but I probably not end up using it all too much.
Yeah. Alright, let's go to the recon tab. First off, I decided to get some Mi2s. Yes, these things can die pretty quickly, but they can.
I have it as well.
They can definitely provide some good spotting, especially in the air.
It's just cheap, good optics. It's never really wrong to take this kind of unit. It's always going to be useful. The only time where I'd say it's wrong taking this is when if you're playing, let's say, a deck that has so many good recon units where you just can't fit it in. But it's never really a useless unit.
Right. Next up, I decided to get some Pruskuminci. I am so bad at pronouncing these names.
Pruskuminci.
All right. Thank you. That's why you're here. I got them.
I don't even check.
I got them in Mi-17s as well. These are going to be kind of my sniper recon, shock train to help pick off enemy infantry from afar. Can't be the two-man squads, but still I think a decent enough frontline unit. And then in addition, I've got oh god.
Specjalne jednotki.
Yes, thank you. And I got the one card of them. Elite in the Mi-25, because that's kind of my philosophy on Mi-25. They need to come and add Elite. But then I also got another card of them in the OT-64Cs as well for a land route. And the Maliukas would also get upgraded and possibly hit something with that veterancy. And finally, in the last card, I decided to try to get some OT-65A Vidras, which have a recoilless rifle. They're just basically the spot, but they can provide a little bit of infantry fighting support. With my infantry.
No! Why don't you take the Sneska?
The Sneska? You mean the thing that sneezes?
Exactly. It's such a nice little unit. It's like a more armored BRDM3, but it's cheaper and instead of wheeled, it's tracked. It's such a nice unit, I'm not trying to toot my own horn here or something. But I think, I was a big part or big influencer when it came to changing this from a worthless 70-point exceptional optics unit to a useful 30 points good optic unit.
I think that's why I looked over it, because I thought it was still like the expensive exceptional optics.
It's been ages ago, but yeah, it was such a noob trap.
Yes, it was. I remember trying to make it work. It was one of the biggest
noob traps, I think. And I myself fell for it as well, very back when it was released. The unit, I think it was in the first DLC for Eastern Bloc. But it is such a useful unit.
Okay.
That's maybe over-exaggerating. That's maybe exaggerating it a bit. But the Vidra, it has bad accuracy, bad range, and only one armor. Sure, it costs only 15 points. But I think the Sneska is ultimately gonna be more useful.
All right. I think I'll try the Vidra this time, but yeah, now that I see that it's been dropped down in price and good optics, I think when I was making the deck, I was just like, oh yeah, that thing, that 60-point exceptional optics, psh, next, kind of thing. I didn't take another look at it, so thanks for addressing that.
It really helped Eastern Bloc in 1v1 back when it was changed. I remember that. I have some good memories of that.
Oh wow, it's got 4 front armor.
Yeah, it's so good against the other tile like Hachinanas, BRDM 3s, etc. But in this 4 front armor instead of 2 or maybe 3, but mostly 2, which you usually see in that for that kind of unit, it helps massively against other autocannons.
All right.
Against tanks, it's not gonna do all too much most of the time, but against autocannons, that 1 or 2 extra armor is massive.
All right, you sold me. I'm definitely going to probably put this in the future. I'm going to try the Vidra just to compare before I put this in.
I myself also have the MI2. I have Special Need Not Gain the MI25. Special Need Not Gain the OT64A because I have no OT64Cs left. Ruskomnitsi in the Tetra, just the very cheap optics just for frontline scout. Like you said, they're not really meant to fight. They're just meant to be cheap and hide in forests and just spot. And that's about it.
All right.
And of course, the SNES gun.
Yeah. All right. The vehicle tab. I only got 1 vehicle from here. Did you?
I got 2.
Ah. Well, the first one. Yeah, I got the Pram too.
The Pram is a nice little unit, yeah.
The Pram, it's like the old CEV where it had that longer range than any tank with its high-power gun. But it also had the Conqueror's missile, so it's basically a very nice long-range support unit.
Yeah, it's also a weird unit. I feel like I'm rarely in a position where I'm like, oh, a Pram would be so useful here. But whenever I end up buying a Pram, it nearly always ends up doing a shit ton of work.
Yeah, it does.
It looks so small and little, but it can do so much work. It's weird.
Well, in Wargame, you do want to have smaller units because they're harder to hit, even though it's medium sized.
I suppose. And then I also have the OT 810D.
Really?
Yes. My main reason being that I just can't fit it in. I'm not a huge fan of it. I tried it myself a lot, but it's still 10.5 support, so I'll probably not end up using it a whole lot, but it's 10.5 support.
I see.
I mean, if it's not getting shot back, it can probably dish out quite a lot of HE, but
it's probably going to be shot back at.
It's just I just had a space left, and it felt more useful than the Conqueror's Jeep because I have Conqueror's infantry and I have the Pram.
Right.
I didn't feel like I'll need that, and I have the tanks with ATGMs as well. So it's just very, very cheap fire support.
Also, ATGM vehicles suffer the problem that if the tank charging at them, they fire their missile, and if the missile hits or misses and the tank's still up, they have to immediately go into reverse. Otherwise, they're going to die once the tank acquires them.
Exactly.
Also, I'm not even going to ask, but I'm pretty sure I know your answer to the TO-55. You hate napalm tanks.
I don't hate it. I just think they're not particularly strong. One reason is being they have no HE shells on their guns.
Well, they don't need HE shells on their gun. They've got HE on their napalm.
Of course, but it still would be like okay, so that they don't have to be at 1,000 meter range. The other thing is napalm is so weird, and it can so easily also backfire and be not as great. The other thing is for how close you have to be, it doesn't have the survivability to be particularly strong. But I'd always take it over the 1 armor M113 Zippo over there what it was.
Yeah. All right.
But yeah.
Helicopter.
But I think it also has a longer aim time than most other guns on their napalm.
You could try. You can check your mod for that.
Yeah, I'll just do that. In the meantime,
helicopters.
It usually takes a while to open up. Yeah, helicopters.
All right. So I basically got 1 of each helicopter. I've got the Mi-35 for the 8 Kokon missiles. And it's got 2 HE rocket pods, so that's pretty decent as well, and a nice yak gun. The Mi-25, which It has those 10 HE power rockets, which just completely decimate infantry and such. Flooded missiles are not going to be hitting anything really, but the 4 HE rockets is all it's really I picked for. And because I had an extra spot and points to spend, I did get the Mi4 helicopter, which I have to say, even though it's useless with 1 HE power rockets, it has 128, so at least can panic infantry, but just lay rockets, raining rockets down on top of them, even if it probably doesn't kill. But every time I see the Mi4 helicopter, every time I always imagine that if a bird goes and lands on one of the outermost rocket pods, the whole helicopter tips over.
Yeah, I can see why. It used to have 80 of the 2 HE rockets, which
Right.
made it actually a very, very, very useful unit.
Yeah.
40 points for such a cheap but effective fire support helicopter.
Mm-hmm.
Very nice to have. I have the Mi-35 and the Mi-25 S24, both updated. Yeah. And you don't really need much more than the Mi-35, because the 42 HE rockets are still going to be pretty strong. The Mi-24 S25. For 15 extra points, you might as well get the helicopter that has good ADGMs. So I mostly really have it in there because I have the 2 AP left. So
Yeah. Oh, I just got the Mi4s because it is fun to just kind of.
yeah, and you had the points, right?
Yeah.
As well. Regarding the flame tank, the napalm actually also has a 1 second aim time, just like the main gun.
Ah. That's a pretty
was
useful
wrong.
too. Okay.
Yeah.
So we go into the aircraft, and the first aircraft that I picked is, of course, the MiG-29 912A with those 4 HE power bombs that are also napalm on top of it.
It's just one of my favorite bombers in the game.
Yeah, like usually you have HE power bombs, or you've got napalm bombs which just spread out the napalm without exploding. This does both with its napalm bombs.
Yeah, and I find it is also a lot more consistent than, let's say, something like a Tornado IDS, because the overall AOE just feels and is so much bigger. And even though there's only 12 HE bombs, it's a lot more effective than what 12 HE looks like, right?
Yeah. Also, it'll spread out the damage with fire afterwards.
Exactly. Also, fun little thing. If your MiG-29 goes bombing and it gets out without getting damaged, then it is refilled basically at the same time as the napalm subs burning. That's pretty funny.
That is pretty good. Okay, next up, I actually got some MiG-23 BNs for anti-tank, emergency anti-tank planes. So, again, I need to. It's more of like a rapid response of crap.
I mean, it's not like you have better options, right?
Right, but it's just more of just like, oh crap, that over there is a heavy tank that needs to be dealt with now. Better grab this thing. And then I also got its cousin, the MiG-23ML, basically their best air superiority fighter. The one thing that the Czech kind of a little bit let down, but
it's capable enough, I suppose.
Yeah.
But you do get 3 on the lead.
Yeah, I got 3 on the lead as well. You might as well have 10 ECM, so you want to be the one to shoot down the enemy first.
Yeah.
And then finally, because I was trying to figure out what to spend points on, I decided to get the Su-7B just because Seed is good, even though it's only got 1 missile.
It's one of the worst Seed missiles, but it's better than nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
I have basically the same tab, but I have a 5th plane.
Yeah.
And that's the Su-25K.
Ah.
Not a huge fan of it, but I suppose it's alright. Yeah, it's a bit like the MiG-23 BN. It's not really particularly great, but it's better than nothing.
I've tried the Su-25 a lot in many different Red 4 decks, and I don't know, I just can't really get it to work. The Thunderbolt kind of.
The big difference is, I suppose, it has only 1 rear armor. The Thunderbolt has 2 rear armor, and 1 armor on planes is equivalent to 0 armor. So it only really matters if you have 2 armor or anything else. So up front, because 2 armor means you'll only take 40% of the damage. A 60% damage reduction when you have 2 armor. So since it only has it up front, if it evacs, in which case it will most likely just turn the back towards the enemy, it is just as vulnerable as any other plane with 10% ECM. And at 750 km/h speed means it won't really get out of range as fast as something like a Hornet or something along those lines. So that's the main problem with those SC-25s. They look kind of tanky, but they really aren't, because the front armor value isn't as useful as the rear armor value on planes. If you have 2, that is. Again, if you have only 1 armor, that's basically useless.
Yeah, hence why I don't really like the SU-25.
Yeah, I don't really like it either, but again, I had the space, and the only other plane that I would consider would maybe be the SU-22 M4, but that is just bad because most of the time it'll die before it even drops the bomb with the low speed and low ECM.
Yeah, I actually skipped over that for that exact same reason.
It looks okay on paper. It's basically like a cheap fighting falcon, but the speed difference is just a huge deal.
Yeah. Alright, so that's basically mostly the Czech deck. I do have a Navy tab filled out, which you like to ignore. Basically, because I don't have really air superiority fighters to defend my ships with, I just got all anti-ship artillery vehicles plus some Pumas.
Alright.
Yep. So, yeah, I think that's pretty good. I will like to definitely try out this deck, and then after I finish playing, come back and make a few change and edits, depending upon how the game goes.
Yep. Alright.
Alright, so this concludes your second viewer-requested deck. Definitely, if we have more viewers who have requested other decks, let's get to building those too.
Sounds good.
Alright, and I'll see you in the next episode, where we'll be playing a game.
See ya, guys.